Welcome to another AUG blog audio post located at augforums.com. That's augforums.com. You can find this specific audio post at augforums.com/audio post 10. That's audio post and the number 10. This is your host, Tim Rodman, coming to you live on Friday, January 31st, 2020, from Columbus, Ohio, where we made it all the way through January without snow, which is great. And in this audio post, we are going to be talking about Acumatica Summit 2020. You could call this a recap of sorts, but it's really just a rundown of what happened during the keynotes, which I took off of my Twitter notes, which I will link to in the audio post here in case you want to take a look at slides and screenshots and that kind of thing. So a lot to cover here. This will be a longer audio post, so let's get to it. First off, regarding the acquisition from last summer, John Roskell said, and here's a quote, "Literally nothing has changed. We're still here, still signed up for years to come." So a couple things about that quote. First, it started with literally, and personally, I'm still fighting the introduction of literally into the English language every other sentence, but there you go. A CEO of a major tech company is using literally. I've got like down, that's incorporated, but for me, but I'm still fighting the use or overuse of literally. And, of course, the rest of that is good news. Nothing has changed, and you could see that in the summit itself. Same format as prior years, same presenters, although a few little hints. I noticed that a couple of times during the keynotes, John Roskell slipped in something along the lines of, "As long as I'm here, something, something." And, maybe setting us up for a post John Roskell future. And then the second thing I noticed is that John Roskell was not on stage during the day 2 keynote, which normally he is. Ollie Janney, he was on stage in the beginning and throughout for the day 2 keynote. So we'll see what happens there, but good news that at least for now, no changes to the leadership. Second, there were close to 2,500 attendees, which was up from 1,500 attendees last year. So an almost doubling increase of 1,000 there, and 50% were there for their first time. And that's pretty interesting, but to me what I think is even more interesting, or a better number, is if you take the 50% of the 2,500, that's what, 1,250. 1,250 out of 1,500 from last year are returning. And I really like that number. To me, that shows the vast majority of people from last year came back, showing they get value out of the summit. So I like that. Regarding customers, there's now over 6,500 customers, up from around 5,200 last year. And that's been pretty steady. I've noticed last few years, it seems to be they add around 1,000 every year, although maybe a little bit more than 1,000 now. Now we got about 1,300. It's probably about 1,200 added last year. Steady growth. And if you look at the analyst reports, they're now talking about that hockey stick style growth, especially now that you've got the money from IFS. So we'll see where that customer count is at next year. John also mentioned the 74% of employees that are in R&D roles. That, of course, is a huge differentiator between Acumatica and other ERP companies. A lot of ERP companies are spending or have 80% of their employees in marketing or sales roles. And the 74% of Acumatica employees being in R&D roles speaks to why the product is so strong and why it's taken longer for them to build momentum. But now that they have, they've got a strong product and they continue to innovate at a fast pace. All comes down to that 74%. John also highlighted the various editions of Acumatica. You've got the, I guess you can call it the distribution edition, you've got the construction edition, manufacturing edition, commerce edition, field service edition, and the commerce edition got highlighted with BigCommerce. There are also integrations to Magento, Shopify, and WooCommerce, but BigCommerce got on stage. Sounds like they have over 68,000 customers and a really nice clean UI. I hadn't seen it that much before. There was a demo during one of the keynotes of BigCommerce, and they've got a nice UI. So that looked pretty interesting with the Commerce Edition there with BigCommerce. Manufacturing Edition, that was the big news of the day, and it started off with an update that Manufacturing Edition is about 25% of all Acumatica customers. That was the lead-in, and then the big bomb drop, big news in my opinion, out of all the keynotes, is that Acumatica acquired JAS Systems, and they acquired them just the weekend before the summit, which, boy, that must make putting together keynotes very, very tricky when you are also in the process of negotiating something like that. Of course, JAS Systems, the ones who made the Manufacturing Edition, and for the last couple of years it's been sold, I believe, under like an OEM type of agreement, where I don't think Acumatica owned the intellectual property, but they had the rights to sell it under Acumatica. Well, now it's a complete acquisition of the entire JAS Systems company, not just the product. Great news for everyone Acumatica related. I hope also great news for JAS Systems. I hope they did well there. But great news because now, I believe it's just a matter of time before we'll see that just included right in the core Acumatica product and support everything just functioning the way rest of Acumatica does. So I think that's great. And it's not a big surprise because the IFS sister company of Acumatica is heavily into manufacturing, and so would expect Acumatica is going to pick up more and more manufacturing focus as time goes on, and this is just, I believe, the first of many manufacturing things to come. Speaking of which, the next thing was e-workplace apps. Now that name did not ring a bell for me, but e-workplace apps is the developer of Batchmaster. That rang a bell for me. That's a process manufacturing application. And they now have a 30-person team developing manufacturing extensions to Acumatica. That is a lot of people. And I should also back up and mention with JAS Systems, which was discrete manufacturing, still is discrete manufacturing, you're now going to have an increased team size. It's not just an acquisition, but you're going to see more development resources go into discrete manufacturing. And now you got a 30-person team, the Batchmaster company, building extensions into Acumatica. Now, what's interesting about this is my understanding is that even though it's the Batchmaster team with that reputation and background, my understanding is that they're building it in Acumatica, not an integration out to Batchmaster. We'll see how that plays out. And they're starting actually with a quality management application built inside Acumatica, and there's an early adopter program starting in March, so just a couple months away from that. And then the process manufacturing will begin beta testing in August later this year. So lots going on manufacturing wise. Very interesting what's going on there. There are now over 200 customers running Acumatica Construction Edition. So if you think about how recently construction got launched, that's a pretty good number, 200. And there was a guy named Stuart from CFMA who came up on stage. CFMA is an organization with 9,000 members and 90 chapters worldwide. And they announced that all new Acumatica construction customers will now get 1 year free CFMA membership. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also an application called CFMA Benchmarker, and that's a way for CFMA members to benchmark, I think they said 22 different financial metrics against their peers in the industry. And that is now available right inside of Acumatica. So lots of cool things going on with these different industry editions. And I love how Acumatica traditionally been such a geeky core product company, but because they have such a strong product, you're now seeing them do some interesting applications to real world situations. And I think this CFMA benchmarker with the ability to compare your 22 financial metrics to other companies in construction is a great example of that. Then about community. So there was some broad talk about community. There's over 300 VAR partners. There's over 200 ISV partners. And I believe the VAR number is actually down, which is a good thing. Acumatica pared down their VAR channel. A lot of people who were officially VARs hadn't sold anything in a long time. So they've pared that down, I believe. And together with the announcements in the VAR area was not really an announcement. We already knew this, but more talk about the relationship now with BDO. BDO is an accounting firm with 63 offices and 7,300 employees worldwide. It's a lot of people. And this partnership with BDO is providing Acumatica with a local presence and industry expertise, with the VARs focusing on their product knowledge. And I love that relationship because more and more VARs are taking a national model. They're implementing remotely, they're selling remotely anywhere, even though it might not be in their backyard. And what still, though, I think is lacking and needed in an ERP implementation is that boots on the ground, local presence, and someone even who looks at things purely from a process standpoint and is not getting hung up on technical details. In my opinion, a VAR struggles to play both of those roles. So I like this BDO partnership. They can come in and provide the project management, process focus, that local presence, and then a VAR can still play the product expert role. And my understanding there is that the VAR still gets full credit for any Acumatica sale, that BDO is purely doing services here. So cool partnership there. On the ISV side, oh, by the way, they brought up someone from BDO on the stage to talk about that. And then on the ISV side, they brought up someone from Smartsheet up on the stage. And a Joy's comment there was that they're doubling down on their existing Smartsheet integration. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but expect to see more related to the Smartsheet integration in Acumatica. Then at the end of this section almost to the end of the section on community, there was a shout out to the Acumatica user groups, which you've got the website acumaticausergroup.com, run by Joel Gress, who was doing an Acumatica user group in Atlanta, Georgia. You also had Doug Hollenbach, who I believe did the first user group out in Denver, Colorado. And now Joel has taken what was his local website and turned it into acumaticausergroup.com to be a place for Acumatica user groups nationally and I think eventually internationally. So focus there is on in-person gatherings, and acumaticausergroup.com helping to facilitate anyone who wants to join a local gathering or even start their own. Definitely check out acumaticausergroup.com. Now, I was a little bummed. I thought that our own augforums.com website would get a mention there, but it did not. So kind of bummed about that. Of course, I'm going to have a separate audio post with more comments on where I see things going in the future with user groups. And then they rounded out the community section with a list of what I count as over 60, that's a 60, product MVPs, and around 15 developer MVPs. And I always get a chuckle out of the MVP list because most people look at MVP and they assume that's one person. In basketball, football, the MVP is one person. But apparently with Acumatica, there's over 60 product MVPs and 15 developer MVPs. Another interesting comment John Roscoe made, he said that 25% of his time is spent on the road visiting customers. And I think that's pretty cool. John is definitely a great business person, just great at drumming up energy, great at connecting with customers. And I would imagine that's a big part of why you see so many of these customer success stories and testimonials starting to get cranked out more and more by the Acumatica marketing department. Then we had a whole section on 2020 R1 new features. So some of these were demoed, some of them were just mentioned, and I'll just go through the list here. So this is the latest version of Acumatica that I believe will officially launch probably in March. This is 2020 R1. And first thing was a cool expense receipts OCR feature. So not only can you take a picture of the expense receipt on your phone, which you've been able to do, but now there's that machine learning OCR logic that kicks in. It's actually using Azure Forms in the background. And that kicks in to recognize automatically, well, where's the dollar amount? What type of expense is it? And, that's the kind of thing. Sounds cool. We'll see what it's like in practice. I'm looking forward to playing around with it. But definitely demos well. We'll see how good it does actually recognizing real world receipts. But I like here that they're using Azure Forms. So rather than come up with their own machine learning expertise, they're able to pick which they felt was the best for this specific application. And being product agnostic when it comes to what they're plugging in on the back end for machine learning, I think that's a really smart approach because they can pick Azure in one case, they can pick Amazon in another case, Google in another case. And so for the expense receipts area, they went with Azure Forms. Acumatica Payroll, second thing, is now available in 2020 R1, and you don't have to be a construction edition customer to use it. So I thought that was interesting. Although they did build it with construction in mind, because there's a lot of complications, maybe the complication is not the right word, but a lot of things around the construction industry and payroll that are specific to construction. Third thing is that individual dashboard widgets. So if you're familiar with Acumatica dashboards, you've got basically a dashboard page that you can drop all sorts of what are called widgets on, different types of widgets. And you can add as many as you want. You just keep scrolling down. And now, pretty cool feature here, you can set an individual widget on a widget by widget basis to have a custom refresh schedule. So that means when you go to the dashboard, you don't necessarily have to have everything recalculate. And that's significant, I think, as Acumatica gets into larger and larger customers with dashboards that are doing increasingly complex things. Sometimes that can make it take a long time to load. So now you can set a custom refresh schedule on a widget by widget basis. So it will only load every couple of hours, once a night, something like that. And it's not hammering the system throughout the day if you don't want it to. So very interesting move there. I think that Acumatica dashboards are definitely not a business intelligence tool, but that feature kind of gives them a step in the business intelligence direction with Acumatica dashboards. Fourth thing, the side panels. So if you've used side panels before, you would click on something in a generic inquiry, and then the little panel on the right-hand side would change to be specific to the row that you clicked on. And now you can do side panels on data entry screens. I really like this because many times someone wants to do a quick lookup when they're on a data entry screen to some type of information. And, they don't like having to go click out to another screen, launch another tab to find that information. Also, it's not context sensitive. Well, now with the side panels on a data entry screen, someone can get that information showing up in a side panel based on whatever record you're entering on the data entry screen. So it's context sensitive. Pretty cool. I'm looking forward to playing with that in practice and coming up with some real world use cases there. Next thing is files. So, a little step back here. I think in the R1 releases every year, you see a lot more of these really cool core features that get introduced. And in the R2 releases in the fall, you see more of the features that people are requesting, more of the module by module type of functionality. So a lot of stuff happening in this R1 release that's just this really cool core tech. And another one here that I just absolutely love is the ability to upload file attachments via the mobile app. So the way it works is you still go into that file attachment button, but what you can do is you can request a file attachment. And I haven't played with it completely on my own, but what it looks like is you click a button inside Acumatica, and then on the mobile app on your phone, you get a notification asking you to upload the attachment to that specific record. And, so I got to think about this in practice, how this plays out, but I think this could be a really fun, really cool feature. Great way to make it easier to get documents digitally or pictures, especially in construction, job sites, things like that. Make it a lot easier, the workflow, to get that attached to transactions in Acumatica. So that's a pretty cool one. I like that one. Another one is if there wasn't enough new big 2020 R1 features, there's a completely new CRM workflow engine. And that workflow engine is a kind of an under the hood thing. If you tried to tweak the workflow in CRM before, you had to use automation steps. Now there's an entirely new workflow engine. And I don't completely understand if it's just available everywhere or only in the CRM area. I kind of suspect it's everywhere, but only being used by the CRM area. Either way, I'd expect us to see this new workflow engine slowly make its way throughout the rest of the application. And it won't go into details there, but it really opens up a lot of doors there in the CRM area to make it fit your business better. Next thing was a cool scheduling optimization functionality that they showed in field service. And another one of these AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning type of things, how to most efficiently schedule a route for someone in field service. And the what's used under the hood here is something called WorkWave. Another example of Acumatica picking a product agnostic technology on the back end for this specific application. So WorkWave being used under the hood for the new field service scheduling optimization functionality. Also in field service, you can now track travel time. So you can start your travel on an appointment. I believe it's on an appointment. And then when you're done, you do stop travel, and that way it can record not only the time you spend, but also the travel time that you spent. So that's kind of nice. And then over into the warehousing area. I really like this one. Up until this point, in my opinion, Acumatica has been pretty light on picking functionality. It was basically just go through the list of bins. You had a little bit of functionality to choose bin by bin which ones get priority, but it was not that intelligent in terms of deciding what to pick out of the warehouse. Now there's new picking options. So three options. One is a single pick, one is wave pick, and the third one is batch pick. So I'm looking forward to playing with those options in the real world. Really happy there though for warehousing that we now have some more rich picking functionality. And the last thing I'll mention under 2020 R1 new features is that in the manufacturing edition, it now supports scanning in the mobile app, just like Acumatica introduced last year in the distribution area, receiving, picking, shipping. You can now also do that in the manufacturing area. And my understanding of it is that it's both for materials and for labor. So a lot of people want to clock in, clock out, especially for labor on their work orders or production orders. And you can now do that with the Acumatica mobile app. Now, there was so much new stuff to pack into these keynotes that did not make it into a demo. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works, because we did not get to see it in the keynotes. Although I will add that I kind of like that Acumatica keeps their keynotes to a reasonable amount of time. They don't just keep expanding them. And there's a great example of something that just had to get cut. So we'll look for a video on that and play with it once it releases in 2020 R1. All right, continuing to move through these keynotes. In day 2, Mike C., who is the CTO of Acumatica and has a really long Russian last name. And if you don't know Russian, you can't pronounce it like me, so everyone calls him Mike C. I love it when he gets up on stage. He always has some great humor, super transparent, super honest, and he's the real brain behind Acumatica, the one who created it. So I love when he gets up on stage and he gets to talk about the kind of stuff that they're working on this year and next year. And he demoed some prototype type stuff. So he did show us actual Acumatica builds that are not available, that are in more of a R&D mode. And whenever he does that, he always tells us when he was instructed to stop showing things because it might cause an error or something like that. But we got to see, first of all, well, it's 3 things total. First of all, we got to see the new user interface. And I like the point that Mike made, that they want to improve the user experience. And the user experience is made up of multiple things. One of them is the user interface. So the user interface has a maybe not completely new look, but definitely a new look. And I like how they're doing some shading in the background to allow your eyes to group certain fields together. They're also doing a lot more with colors and displaying warning and error messages right on the screen instead of you having to hunt for them and hover over them. Look nice and clean, and I like that we're going to see some investment in a new user interface coming hopefully later this year. We'll see, this year or next year. But user experience includes not just a new user interface, but also the workflow and automation. And Mike made a very accurate comment that really whatever user wants, and I've had people tell this to me, they want one big green button that just does their job for them, right? So it's not just about how the screens look, it's about how you move through the system and reducing the clicks, reducing the amount of places you need to go. So they're also making investments, and we see it there with the new CRM Workflow Engine. And we also, Mike demoed this really cool, I believe it's part of this whole new workflow engine, is now this graphical way of looking at a workflow. So the new Workflow Engine 2020 R1 is still something that is not graphical, but what Mike demoed inside Acumatica was more of a traditional workflow like you would draw on a chart, with a box and then an arrow to the next box, and then a decision tree where it then splits off into 2 separate paths. And you can add new nodes to that tree. You can fork things off, and it looked pretty cool. It looked very much like a Microsoft Flow to me, or Microsoft CRM has a workflow engine that's similar, or SharePoint as well. And now it looks like Acumatica will have something similar in a future release. And then the last thing in this section of future technology was accounts payable OCR functionality. And so similar to the expense receipts, having the machine learning kick in and automatically recognize things, same thing in accounts payable now. We'll be seeing that in the future. And I didn't quite catch the workflow completely. It looked to me like it actually came through email and Outlook and got kicked off that way. So I'm not completely sure how you would take a big stack of invoices and scan them in. I got to look into that more. But of course, the hardest part there is the OCR functionality and having it be machine learning generated so that when you correct it, it learns better for next time. Now, this is kind of one of those things where I'll believe it when I see it because they demoed the same type of thing back in San Diego at Summit 2017. And I can't remember the solution that was being integrated with at the time. And I kind of wonder if it's actually the same solution, but now built into Core Acumatica. It'd be interesting to find out what's under the hood here. But in both cases, here in the summit in 2020 and the summit back in 2017, in both cases, that was the feature that got the most applause and the most conversation going in the audience. Actually, I would say for any other feature, I don't hear a lot of chatter going on. I remember very well back in San Diego and again in Las Vegas in 2020, a lot of chatter in the audience after that demo. So a lot of people interested in accounts payable and machine learning OCR type of functionality. All right, next section was when a joy gets up on stage. Of course, this is always the fun section towards the end of day 2 when we get to see these crazy future technology examples. In prior years, we've had Amazon Alexa demos. There was a flying drone on the stage at a prior summit. So always fun section here, and a joy is always good for a funny quote or two. This year he had, what happens in ERP shouldn't stay in ERP. Very appropriate being in Vegas there. And some of the things we covered here, one was Adobe PDF. There's now this Adobe PDF as a service, so you can edit PDFs now inside of Acumatica. And I wasn't clear in this future text section. It's always a little confusing to me. What's real and available now? What's just this cool thing, potential thing they put together for a demo? Seemed to me that this Adobe thing is available now because they mentioned that Adobe Sign Enterprise is available now for 30 days to all new Acumatica customers. Also wasn't completely sure there if it's just only new customers or any Acumatica customer. I kind of think it's any Acumatica customer, but 30 days free there to let you try out that, especially that editing functionality. Next thing was an integration with Microsoft Teams, showing how Acumatica support cases were getting pushed into Teams. And then there was a Teams button inside of Acumatica. So you're seeing it both ways. You were seeing Acumatica info in Teams, and then on the Acumatica screen, there was a Teams button to help people work in both places. I'm not really a big Teams person myself, so I didn't pay too much attention to that, but that was kind of cool. Next one was a integration with a product called Climacell. Climacell, all one word. And it's a hyper-local weather forecasting engine that forecasts weather down to your GPS coordinates. I think especially relevant in industries like agriculture. And they did a cool little demo there of showing some weather data right on a daily field report for construction. So that was kind of cool. Next thing was image recognition. So you've got these machine learning functionalities here, and I think this one might have been Azure. I can't remember for sure. But one thing is to OCR a document and pull out text off of the document. Another thing is to recognize an image and tell you what it is. Is it a person? Is it a building? Is it an animal? Describe the image in words to make it easier to search for an image. So they showed using some image recognition on the back end, and then when you go to the search files area on the universal search in Acumatica, universal search, of course, you can search 4 different things. You can search the menu items, you can search the transactions and profiles, the help articles, and the 4th thing is the files themselves. Normally, you can only search the file name. Well, this now showed that the image recognition allowed that search feature in the files to search the image descriptions, whatever that image recognition engine kicked out. It searched those as well to make it easier to find images that you're looking for. So another one of those kind of cool things. Don't really know how real it is, how available it is today, but cool thing to show in a demo. The next two things, though, to me were more on the ground practical because Acumatica is so heavily into distribution and warehouse environments. So the first one was a digital warehouse bin screen. Instead of having just a sticky label on a warehouse bin, this was a digital screen. And I couldn't tell from sitting in the audience, but I kind of would guess that these would be e-ink displays. If you've ever gone to Kohl's department store, you've probably noticed that their signs, I think they're ahead of the game in my opinion. Their signage is not paper. It's actually digital screens. But digital screens are expensive and they also take a lot of power. So the ones at Kohl's, I'm almost positive, are e-ink displays, like an Amazon Kindle, which is much less power and just very simple display, but you can still change it. So you can roll out new pricing in a Kohl's store without having to change all the signage or do a sale, something like that. So same idea here. I believe these were e-ink, I would guess. And now you've got digital screens on the warehouse bins. And so the idea here, when it was demoed, is that you no longer have to walk around with a paper pick sheet, that you could go down the aisle and the bin location signs would light up telling you where to go. Now, as I'm thinking about this a little bit more, that might not be e-ink because I think there might have been some color in there. So not 100% sure there. But the idea was to let the bin kind of pull you towards it by lighting it up. And then you pick it out of the bin and it makes it more like an electronic rather than a paper picking. In addition to, of course, the ability to scan it with the mobile app. So it looked interesting, looked practical to me. I think it boils down to, okay, well, what exactly are the savings? And I haven't thought through that. What's the time savings on this? How much does that really make us more efficient? And what's the cost also? What does it cost for these little screens? But, Ollie made the comment here that you can now gamify your workers. And I got a little bit of the chills when he said that. I'm not really a big fan of that. Of course, we were right there in Las Vegas, and you just look at the game. If you want to look at gamification, Las Vegas is a great example of that. And I just feel like you've got just people plugged into machines. I'm not personally a big fan of that. This driven targets in your warehouse that squeeze every last life drop out of the human beings. I don't know. It almost sounds more like indentured servitude to me than gamification, but just my personal take on it. As far as making a warehouse more efficient, I could definitely see how digital screens could help with that. And then the last one was eliminating human beings altogether. This one looked pretty cool. What was shown was MIR. Mir is maybe how it's pronounced. It stands for Mobile Industrial Robot. An integration with two Mir robots. One was an arm that had a suction cup on it that could actually rotate over and pick up a box. And then it dropped it onto a second robot, which was like a flat tray on wheels. And that second robot then went across the stage, and this would be taking it from the warehouse area out to the packing or shipping area. So also looked very interesting. Question is, how far ahead of the real world is this? I don't see Amazon Alexa being used in the real world a ton in business yet. So how far ahead is this? And I did look up these Mir robots. Looks like the list price is around $30,000. So it also comes down to a cost question. But I did find a little bit, some articles on people actually using them and talking about how many people they were able to replace. So it sounds like it's actually being used. And what was demoed was in Acumatica, a warehouse transfer. And when you click save on the warehouse transfer, that's what triggered the robot to start doing its thing. Pick the item and put it on the cart and move it to another area of the warehouse. So definitely some cool stuff there. Always fun to see that section with the joy and all that crazy future technology. Then I'll wrap it up with two more points. One is that John Roskell ended the summit at the end of day 2 there, saying that don't expect anything to change while he's here. So another one of those little clues and comments there, while he's here, while he's around. And if you look at it, next summit 2021 will be John Roskell's 8th summit. That's a long time in ERP years, or at least ERP these days. So no matter how much longer John Roskell's around, I really like the consistency that he's brought. Ever since, well, I guess the first one was actually Denver in August of 2014. Since then, starting with Long Beach in 2015, you've had the same name, it's just called Acumatica Summit. You've had it the same time of year, January, February timeframe, and I just love that consistency. So to me, that's all John Roskell. So we'll see how much longer he sticks around. The longer the better, as far as I'm concerned. And the more we continue this annual summit cadence, the better. I think it just helps to keep building momentum. People know what to expect, and they've just been great every year. So last thing is next year in 2021, it'll be back in Las Vegas at the Wynn Hotel. So back in Las Vegas. For me, not a Las Vegas fan. My first time out of the airport personally in Las Vegas. I was hoping it would be my last time, but apparently next year we'll be in Vegas again. I do like personally, I like the San Diego and Orlando evening, Monday night pool party, like out around the pool, not in the pool, but around the pool or just outside. When there were some games back in San Diego and Orlando, nice casual, easy to talk to people type get together. This year it was at a full on nightclub in Las Vegas with the pumping music and dancing where you have to yell at each other to to have a conversation. So personally not a fan of that. I'm still waiting for someone to design a software conference for introverts like me, maybe something in the mountains or something like that. But, probably not going to happen. And I guess the good thing about it being in Vegas is the reason it's in Vegas, and that's because of the size. Acumatica has just outgrown the other locations, and they don't really have much of a choice at this point. They're back in Vegas and expecting over 3,500 people next year. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, so I think I don't have any more comments on the Acumatica Summit. That's my attempt at a recap. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next AUG blog audio post. Take care.